take a deep breath. Settle in, because today we're going to talk about a woman who will completely transform everything you think you know about money, about wealth, and about what's actually possible in your life. Her name is Catherine Ponder. And before we get into her teachings, before we get into the books, before we get into the millions of lives she changed, I need you to understand something about this woman. She wasn't born wealthy. She wasn't born privileged. She wasn't born with connections or advantages or any of the things we typically associate with success. She was a young widow, a single mother, a legal secretary making $25 a week. And yet by the time she passed away, she had written 17 books that have sold millions of copies worldwide. Her first book, The Dynamic Laws of Prosperity, published in 1962, is still considered one of the greatest prosperity classics ever written. Not one of the greatest of that decade, not one of the greatest of that century, one of the greatest ever written, period. The question is how? How did a broke single mother from South Carolina become one of the most influential spiritual teachers on the planet? What did she discover that the rest of us haven't? And more importantly, can you apply those same principles to your own life right now, today, regardless of your current circumstances? Let's start at the beginning. Catherine Ponder was born on February 14, 1927, in Hartsville, South Carolina. Small town, humble beginnings. Nothing about her early life suggested she would become a world-changing figure. But when she was young, something happened that planted a seed. Her mother became seriously ill, not just a little sick, gravely, dangerously ill. The kind of illness that made the family prepare for the worst. Doctors didn't have answers. Medicine wasn't helping. It looked like the end. Then one day, Catherine's father met an engineer. Complete stranger. Random encounter. And that engineer handed him a Unity magazine and said, "Call these people in Kansas City. They'll pray for your wife's health." He made the call, and within days, Catherine's mother was completely healed. Young Catherine watched this happen. She watched her mother go from death's door to full health through nothing but prayer. And something clicked. She thought, if prayer can heal the body, what else can it do? What else is possible that we don't understand? That question would drive her for the rest of her life. She eventually enrolled in the Unity Ministerial School and graduated in 1956. 2 years later, in 1958, she was ordained as a Unity Church minister. And here's where the story gets really interesting. That same year, a recession hit America. People were losing jobs, losing homes, losing hope. And Catherine Ponder, newly ordained, started teaching a prosperity course at the Unity Church in Birmingham, Alabama. She took everything she'd learned about spiritual law, about prayer, about the nature of consciousness, and she applied it to one question: how do we create abundance? The notes and experiences from that course became her first book. She sent the manuscript to Prentice-Hall, one of the biggest publishers in the country, and in 1962, The Dynamic Laws of Prosperity hit bookstores. It's never been out of print since. Now, before we dive into her specific teachings, we need to understand what Catherine Ponder meant by prosperity, because if you think she was just talking about money, you've already missed the point. She said the word prosper actually means hope. It means to be fulfilled, she wrote. You are only prosperous when you are experiencing peace, health, and abundance in your life. If you have money but no peace, you're not prosperous. If you have health but no purpose, you're not prosperous. True prosperity is wholeness in every area of your life. This is crucial, because when most people think about wealth, they think about bank accounts and investments and retirement funds. And those things matter. But Catherine Ponder understood that money without meaning is just numbers on a screen. Real prosperity is the experience of life flowing through you in every dimension: physical, emotional, spiritual, and financial. So what did she teach? What were the specific principles that transformed her life and the lives of millions of readers? The first principle, and probably the most controversial, is tithing. Now, before you click away, before you roll your eyes, before you say, "Here we go with another religious pitch," hear me out, because Catherine Ponder's understanding of tithing has nothing to do with religion and everything to do with physics. Tithing simply means giving 10% of your income to your spiritual source, whatever that means to you. A church, a charity, a cause you believe in, an organization that feeds your soul. The point isn't the destination. The point is the act, she wrote. When you give tithes and offerings, you are not giving to a person or an organization. You are giving to God. You are acknowledging that your source is infinite, not your paycheck. You are breaking the grip of fear on your consciousness. And here's the part that will challenge everything you think you know about money. She said, when you feel you cannot tithe, that is the time you cannot afford not to. Think about that for a moment. When you feel most broke, most afraid, most convinced that you don't have enough to give, that's exactly when giving becomes most powerful. Why? Because giving is an act of faith. It's a declaration that your supply doesn't come from your bank account. It comes from something deeper, something infinite, something that can't be touched by recessions or layoffs or unexpected bills. Catherine Ponder lived this principle before she taught it. As a legal secretary making $25 a week, she started tithing. $2.50. That was her rent money. That was her food money. That was everything. But she gave it anyway. And then something interesting happened. Her salary increased to $27.50, then to $50. Then higher. Not because she was manipulating God, but because she was changing her own consciousness. She was proving to herself that she could trust the invisible source rather than the visible paycheck. She tells the story of a 50-year-old man who attended one of her lectures. This man had been bouncing from job to job. His wife had health problems. They were barely making it. He was tired and discouraged and running out of hope. He heard Catherine speak about tithing, and something clicked. He decided to try it. Not because he believed it would work, but because nothing else was working. Within weeks, he got a job as a salesman at a steel company. The first job he'd ever actually enjoyed. Within 2 years, the local dealership of that company became available for purchase. He borrowed money, bought it, and became the owner. Within 12 years, he was completely financially independent. That man's life didn't change because he wrote a check. It changed because he made a decision to trust something bigger than his circumstances. He broke the seal on his own abundance by opening his hand and letting something go. The second principle Catherine Ponder taught is something she called chemicalization. And if you've ever tried to change your financial situation and found that things got worse before they got better, this concept will explain exactly what happened. Chemicalization is the process that occurs when new thoughts meet old thoughts in your subconscious mind. When you start thinking about prosperity, when you start affirming abundance, when you start believing that you deserve wealth, the old beliefs don't just roll over and die, they fight back. You'll find yourself suddenly irritated at people you thought you'd forgiven. You'll find old fears resurfacing. You'll find unexpected expenses popping up. You'll find yourself thinking, see, this prosperity stuff doesn't work. I tried it, and now everything's worse. But Catherine Ponder said this is actually a sign that it is working. She wrote, Chemicalization is a purification process. It's the conflict between old negative thought patterns and new positive beliefs. The old thoughts are rising to the surface to be released. If you don't panic, if you don't resist, you'll move through it, and something higher and better will emerge. She compared it to spring cleaning. When you open the windows and start sweeping, dust flies everywhere. It looks worse before it looks better. But that's how you know the cleaning is actually happening. One woman came to Catherine after a lecture and said, I went home and forgave everyone I could think of. A few weeks later, she came back and said, I feel terrible. I had no idea how many people I was actually resenting. Now that I've started forgiving, all this anger is coming up that I didn't even know was there. Catherine smiled and said, That's exactly how it works. Keep going.